Hello, in this presentation we're going to be looking at how to go about designing the visual elements of your presentation. We've already talked about how to use data visually to make your point, but the design, how you put things on the screen, etc., is really impactful for your reader and your viewer to really make sure that they're getting the right kind of appeal from your argument. So the first thing that I want you to consider is the idea of less is more. Because wordy graphics, so visuals that have a lot of text, are actually not that easy to follow. See what I mean? If you have just a big block of text, we're just reading, we might as well be reading an essay instead of a visual argument where the text should be used as a tool to help aid in the visual argument, not something to supplant that visual appeal. Next, in terms of elements of design, I want you to remember this phrase. Visual contrast implies logical contrast. Visual contrast implies logical contrast. Now take a moment and think about what that might mean. Well, if you look at the colors I have here, some of those words are yellow, which means they stand out from the rest. So visual contrast, something is visually different. It implies logical contrast, meaning that it implies that it is different in some meaningful way, not just as a random choice. So for instance, if you have, in this case, everything is in white text, but one thing is in yellow, it's something that I as the author want to emphasize. I want to point it out to you, draw your attention to it. If I just did that randomly to one of the lines, it would really not be all that well communicated. But if I wanted to really focus on something, draw your attention to it, that change of color is a really effective way to do that. So once again, visual contrast implies logical contrast. Now, when you are changing your colors, though, you want to make sure you don't go overboard. For instance, you can have font colors that are hard to read. So for instance, you can kind of make out a sentence right here. But that color does not have enough contrast. So see how it's a light gray on a darker gray, which is really not an effective way to communicate. There's a reason we have black ink on white pages, because of strong contrast. So this white text on a dark background works really well. But just because you can see it doesn't mean it's effective. For instance, I could change colors so much to the point where it's actually distracting. It takes away from the clarity. So we want to make sure that we're using our color choices in meaningful ways. Now, colors can set mood. For instance, some colors are considered warm. Red, orange, yellow, pretty much the colors we associate with warm things like fire, the sun, etc., give us a kind of a sense of warmth, whereas cool, blue, certain shades of green, thinking about blue colors of the water, right, that gives a cooler sense to the viewer, so more calming. And similarly, there are certain colors that have symbolic meaning. For instance, red suggests passion, warmth, right? There's a reason that stoplights are red to get our attention. Blue suggests calm, water, peace, the sky, all of those elements, so that can create a very soothing sense. What about green? Take a second and think about what green might symbolize. The way I see it is really can represent two main things. On one hand, it can represent money. Our money in the United States is green, so that's clearly something that can be evocative. So if you're dealing with financial issues. But also green has been used to talk about the green movement or the environmental movement. And the reason for that should be pretty clear, right? A lot of things in nature, especially when they're healthy, plants, life, etc., are green. So if you're thinking about these color choices and what they might symbolize, that can be a really effective way to subconsciously tap into your reader's mind and get your point across in a way that really appeals to them. Now, this also should be pretty clear, but I just want to draw your attention to, if you're talking about sizes of fonts, a larger font should imply greater importance. That's why headlines, things at the top, are usually bigger. Bold text also provides emphasis as well as a hierarchy, and a change in font should indicate a change in importance. Once again, it should not just be random. Once you've decided on things like color and the size of text, you also need to think about layout. Viewers view things like reading. So in English, we read from left to right and top to bottom. But what if on your slide you have something at the top, but to the right, and something to the left, but to the bottom? Which comes first? Take a moment and think about which one of these you get drawn to first. Now, whenever I poll students of this in person, about half of them say they went to the top automatically, even though it was to the right. About half say they went to the left on the first go, even though it's coming down from this one. So if you want something that is very clearly laid out, you can think about from the top and going down and to the left. But at the same time, if it doesn't matter when your reader processes things, you can play around with the layout a little bit more. But you do want to be aware of how your viewer is going to view what's up there on the slide. You also want to make sure you're not overdoing it. In this presentation, you can have multiple slides, and you will have multiple slides, so you don't need to overdo it on any given slide. Limit the number of images and keep them simple. Because if you don't, you're going to have something that's symbolically a lot like this. Big mess, a lot of stuff in there that might be valuable, but it's hard to use it in any meaningful way. Whereas a slide that has something very simple like this, for instance, if we think about the part of our grade that is left in this class, the finished work is this large piece of the pie. Our final project is this piece. This can give your reader very clear, direct understanding, but it's not overwhelming them with too many things to focus on. A few other things to consider. One has to do with your background. As you can see, I use the design here that's a pretty simple dark background, has a little bit of contour, just adds some level of interest, but it's nothing too distracting. Now, once I had a student who wrote their topic about LSD, and so they decided, hey, why don't I do something that's very evocative of that movement, of the LSD movement, and so they came up with this tie-dye. So as you can see, yeah, this probably wasn't the best choice, because even though it might be very fun at first, trying to look at a presentation on this is not very conducive to understanding for your viewer. So a slide is easier to read without a busy background, for sure. Also, you might small font is hard to read, so a font size that's easy to read while remaining balanced is important as well. Once again, it's all about the viewer's experience when they're looking through your presentation. And finally, a simple thing, but proofreading your presentation is essential, because nothing's going to kill the final polish of your presentation like bad grammar, punctuation, or spelling. It really sticks out, especially since there's so little language. If you're writing a 1,200-word essay, a few grammar mistakes here and there kind of blend in. It's not the end of the world. But if you only have 20 words on a slide and there's a misspelling that really sticks out, it's really hurting to your ethos. So take those guidelines that I showed you here and also any other ideas you have with your design, and as you're creating your final presentation, obviously the information, the research is going to be the most important piece, but definitely spend some time with the design to make sure that it is something that is going to appeal to your reader on that more emotional, visceral level, because that is what's going to make your presentation go to that next level of excellence.